Well, welcome back to the Pixel Classroom podcast on another edition of the History of Video Games. Today we're taking a look at one of the strangest, most ambitious, and most original games that was ever released on the Nintendo Entertainment System, The Adventures of Rad Gravity. Released by Activision in 1990 and developed by Interplay, Rad Gravity arrived late in the NES life cycle. It wasn't a blockbuster like Super Mario Bros. 3, and it wasn't a household name like Mega Man. Yet, more than 35 years later, retro gamers are still talking about it. Why? Because there is nothing quite like it. If I had to describe Rad Gravity in one sentence, I say it's what happens when you throw Bruce Campbell into a science fiction adventure, give him a giant laser sword, and let Sam Raimi direct the whole thing. Now, obviously, that never happened, but if you played Rad Gravity, you probably understood exactly what I mean. The hero Rad Gravity is one of the most memorable protagonists of the NES era. Over the years, retro gamers have joked endlessly about the enormous chin. Some viewers have even joked about the chin as he even arrives 5 minutes before he actually teleports on the planet with the rest of him. Yet somehow it just works. Rad looks exactly like the kind of the overtop action superhero needed for a galaxy-spanning adventure. The story begins with Rad being sent on a mission to stop the evil Agathos from restore order to the galaxy. To do that, he's needed to recover powerful compumines, which are scattered across the multiple worlds that, of course, communicate and between the planets. At first, it sounds like a very straightforward good versus evil story, but as we discover later, things aren't quite that simple. What follows is one of the most ambitious adventures ever attempted. Players travel across the galaxy filled with unique planets, including Cyberia, Volcania, Sauria, and of course the infamous Volcania, an asteroid belt, and more. Every world feels different. Cyberia definitely serves as an icy introduction to the game, teaching players the basics of well-established science fiction setting. Volcania, which is actually a junkyard planet, reminds players this is not your typical platformer. Strange environments, hazards, inventors, and thing. In fact, this entire level has actually made it into the November 1990 issue of GamePro, where the Adventures of GamePro comic, which a character is actually put in the video game world to stop an alien interdimensional invasion. Yes, you heard that right. It was 1990, folks. That he actually does it. But you can definitely tell the artist and the writer only got so many notes for it, because no matter how many times you blast those plastic rat bats, they do not get destroyed unless you crush them after they attach themselves to your head. The rest of the level in the game and the comic still match up. Cyberia actually remains one of the most memorable worlds in the game, and long before Star Fox Adventures introduced GameCube players to Dinosaur Planet, Rad Gravity was already sending players into a prehistoric world filled with dangerous creatures. And then there's Utopia, one of the strangest locations in the entire adventure, because the planet's entire gravity system has been disrupted, causing the world to become upside down, literally. And I'm actually think there's some mastermind or some great boss that does this that leads to Rad Gravity, but not in this game. Instead, the gravity device was stolen by a group of kids. That's exactly how sort of a bizarre comic book logic this game has. The asteroid belt serves as a major skill check. Looking back, it feels less like a planet, more like a preparation for the game's final boss. And then there's, of course, Volcania. If you played Rad Gravity, you probably just had a flashback. Volcania remains one of the most infamous locations in the entire game. The platform becomes more demanding, the hazards become more dangerous, and the game experts players apply to everything in this level. For many players, Volcania wasn't just another world, it was a moment where the game asked, how badly do you really want to see the end of this game? One of the reasons Rad Gravity stands out is the incredible amount of progression built in each experience. Rad Gravity begins with a simple laser sword. He gains the most powerful super sword. And then, of course, he has a range of weapons from the pistol to the vertical gun to the maxi gun. Players can also collect the Saurian crystals that are devastating crystal bombs. But weapons are only part of the equation. Throughout the adventure, players discovered armored upgrades, power bars, and special equipment completely change how this game is played. The teleportation beacon allows players to throw a marker, and instead of teleporting to its location, the communicator provides a way to return to Rad's ship and even save the players from certain doom. Translator, of course, allows Rad to understand alien messages throughout the galaxy. And the energy disc helps players float over dangerous terrain and is essential to get through the final boss. Looking back, it's remarkable how many of systems Interplay managed to squeeze into the single NES cartridge. And that wasn't simply a platformer game, it was an adventure. And the adventure often required the players to revisit previous planets to uncover new secrets and upgrades. And today we call that backtracking. But back then, it was simply figuring things out for yourself. This wasn't always easy. Remember, this was 1990. There are no YouTube walkthroughs, no online strategy guides, no wikis. You had an instructional manual and maybe that issue of GamePro I talked about earlier. The actual objective was something else. Unpredictable became one of the game's greatest strengths. The bosses deserved special missions as well. Unlike many other NES games where it was straightforward, Rad Gravity actually asked players to think. Several bosses function like puzzles, some traditional battles, some require special weapons, others require observation, experiments, and tricks. In some situations, creative players could even use the teleportation beacon to bypass certain encounters with it. Basically, its own form of a game skip when there really wasn't a game skip. For 1990 NES game, this had to be one of the most remarkably advanced designs. Another fascinating part of Rad Gravity was, of course, all its history and pieces. But it's also very weird. A lot of critics also read that the game had too much blocky animation and was too simple at times. But actually, with all that set up, finally players reach the final world to confront Agathos. But that's when the game delivers one of the most final surprises. Without spoiling every detail, players discover that the story they had been told was entirely inaccurate. The mission wasn't exactly what it appeared to be, and the conflict wasn't simply as good as evil, as everything gets flipped on its head. For a 1990 action platformer, this was completely original. The fact that the entire game was completely a supervillain plot, if you think about it, which leads Rad Gravity to one of those final battles with the evil Kakios, which of course has been aiding him this entire time, and that gravity level really comes back into. It combined a lot of exploration, backtracking, puzzle solving, creative boss battles, weapons upgrade, armor upgrades, gravity mechanics, and surprisingly ambitious science fiction story, all a thing for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Was it perfect? No. Was it memorable? Oh, you absolutely guarantee it was memorable, and perhaps that's one of the greatest compliments for retro gaming can conceive. After 35 years later, players are still debating its strengths, its weaknesses, and they still are talking about it all these days. I remember receiving my copy many years ago at our Toys R Us way back in at the old Spring Hill Mall and just playing that thing forever until I solved the game on my own. It only took about 3 months. Not bad for a 7th grader at the time. Well, everybody, that is all I've got for this episode of the History of Video Games. If you like what you see here, think about liking and subscribing to the channel, and definitely put in some comments in here of what you would like to see in upcoming episodes each month. That's going to